recording now.
Sure.
And guys, I just want to let you know my computer's recording this Zoom session. Thanks. So and I'll post it on my YouTube because I love to.
So we did not get another alert from Zoom this time.
Yeah, because I think it's already recording. So my request, Martin, which I sent you in chat, which I'll reiterate here, is when you do post it elsewhere, are you willing to link it back to the position where I will post this particular video? Just so that we can at least have a possibility that people here can see the interaction over there and vice versa.
I'm not sure what you mean, but I agree. You'll just have to tell me what you mean. Are you saying that when the same video that you recorded before me started, is you want to put a link somewhere on the written text underneath, and it'll say, like, if you want to see a shorter version from when Martin recorded, you can link back to his channel? Is that what you mean?
I'll say something like, yes, I'll put a comment in my standard YouTube playlist that says, hey, Martin also recorded the same event. Here's a link to his version of it. And hopefully you will do the same. That way, people who have observations here and want to see what those people say have a possibility of doing so.
And when you say version, I know that sometimes people can choose to see the individuals in a particular format or not. Or you might be talking about what my title would be as opposed to a different title, or what my text would be underneath from what I saw or from what I think happened, which is a great way. We should actually all do this and say next week, oh, last week I gave it this title because this is what I noticed when I was participating, or watched it again. That'd be a great learning exercise to see how we interpret what is actually happening with our behaviors and the behaviors of others.
Yep, all of the above. Okay, so that's my request.
Okay,
Heiner had his hand up, and then Stacy has her hand up.
Well, some of this was already clear. And I think for newcomers, it is important to get the idea of our philosophy behind. So we are very open, and we don't really look into copyrights, and we just don't want to have our videos changed and then an alternative version is made public. So all this maybe needs every 2 months a session of tech people wanting to get the details. I raised my hand for another issue. I see, Sam, that you are doing live transcripts. And I did not, in my version yet, activate live transcripts. Where do you do it?
I'm not sure. I just did it as you spoke because I forgot to do it at the beginning of the session. But for me, at least, since I'm the host, there's in the control bar down below, there's actually an item that says live transcript, and I just enabled it. So I'm not sure you have the same. Does anybody else have that live transcript?
Yeah, what we don't have is the enable disable. That's because you're the host. We have only the option to have it presented on screen. Or not.
Okay, because I want to do it and check it out in comparison to Otter AI doing it.
Yeah,
because it is Otter AI. Otter AI is when you enable transcripts on Zoom, it is provided by Otter, because Zoom, I think, bought Otter or have a agreement with them.
They have an agreement, but my question is, because I saw when testing Otter AI in another environment, that they were really nicely able to edit the stored live transcript, because that is very helpful, because normally live transcripts are with who said it and the minute when a new sentence or whatever was said, and to use it as for a prompter, to just use this as a raw material for a prompter and just say, okay, I import it to a prompter, and then see, oh, this sentence or this connection to the next chapter I did not really say, then it's very, very nice to make not only live transcripts, but really structure presentations you do as the final presentations, not just like such a live talk like now.
Heiner,
I also wanted to say bye-bye because I
Hey.
have to be in another session.
Before you leave, Heiner, at the bottom of the screen where it says the participants and the chat, there's a button that says live transcript. If you click on it, it'll give you the option to show it,
Yes,
save
but not
And
to
save
edit
it.
it.
yes,
but not to edit it, right?
you,
Okay.
you can, there's at the bottom of the full transcript, it says save transcript, it's a button. So it's going to save the full transcript file to your computer, and that becomes an editable file on your computer.
Yes, but how to edit it? In
Use an
Otter,
editor.
it's very easy to take the timelines out, to take the speakers out, and to edit it like I can edit it now when I look at my live transcript. Then it would take me hours to just take the time notes out. And this is what Otter provides very, very professionally.
So
That
we're all
would be-
learning things here. It does turn out that when I turn on live transcript, I can actually assign someone to actually create the live transcript. So somebody
Mhm.
who are particularly good at hearing and good at typing, let's say it's you, Heiner, I could actually say, okay, you will provide the live transcript and you could actually do it and everybody else would see what you're typing, okay? So
Okay.
that is also a possible mode.
Wow.
Next time, I'll present you a screen shot where I show you what kind of manipulation alternatives Otter AI is offering to the transcript file. Anyway, I got my questions answered. I can listen a little bit more to you, but I'm in another window. Bye.
It's also
Just for the
possible-
record, sorry, go ahead, Barry.
It's also possible that if you save the transcript, you can take that transcript and ask Otter to provide you the editing services as opposed to just your, word processing or whatever. So I would say take the saved transcript and bring it up in Otter if you can.
Yeah.
And then use
Yes,
Otter's
but-
tools.
But you need to have an Otter license.
Probably.
Possibly. I have Otter, but I don't have the premium Otter.
So
Most of
you
these systems
only
have
have
a
a test version and you cannot really work with it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you get just sort of the plain vanilla, so no extra.
I don't know
Bells
much
and
about this
whistles.
stuff, but from living on the West Coast, I know there's sea otters and river otters, but the river otters also go in the sea.
No, I have worked with Otter and I don't have a paid license. And I have found that, yes, it does try to do an attempt at speaker identification. Again, you have to spend a lot of time correcting it. And so you also have to spend a lot of time correcting the actual words that get transliterated as well. So it's not quite as easy and as smart as it wants to be. However, they're getting better. Josh knows this also. For our purposes of just having search to get to those words that appear, it turns out, we haven't really utilized speaker identification a lot, but obviously, there's still way, way more we could evolve to.
I just want to be sure that I understand what you guys are talking about, because transcript is like our spoken words into text. It's not the chat that we have beside,
That's
right?
correct.
Correct.
That's correct.
And the chat, when I watched the video from last week afterwards, it wasn't there unless I have to own the file and open it in some way. So I couldn't
No, the
see
chat
that.
in YouTube is not posted on YouTube, no.
No, but I mean the Zoom, when I rewatched the Zoom from the link of all the 600,
can't
or
see.
just doing a search, I just
Right.
did barn raising on the TV here, YouTube, and it showed up under the date, right? That's how I watched it. So of course it doesn't open up the chat, and that's something I assume nobody else would have access to on YouTube, I assume.
It doesn't. However, usually with one or, n weeks afterwards, I do post a Google Doc, which has the participants, the date, the link to the video, and the chat itself, and the actual transcript that's produced automatically by YouTube. And I post that as a first or second comment to the YouTube video. And I've done that now for several years. So I would say most, if not all, of our videos have an associated document that has that chat transcript in it. I am probably 3 or 4 weeks behind, but I just have that as a habit.
Is the reason we do all this because we believe we will at some point, or some people will discover us and what we do and pick up patterns and somehow learn 1 or 2 things from these patterns that we assume would be incredibly marvelous and advance human civilization? I don't know, like, I don't know why it's like, what's the purpose of all this complex stuff, you know?
Again, the use of the word complex in my mind is unnecessary, but I will answer your question. There is a set of possibilities, of which there are at least 2 interesting ones. One is that eventually some of us, or some people who come by afterwards, can see the larger arc of conversation and how it's evolved and what insights we've actually come up with. That's the happy case. The other case is people will say, oh, here were a bunch of people who thought they were smart, who thought they were collaborative, but they produced nothing, okay? And here's why. They talked over each other, they didn't listen, they didn't take notes, they didn't, or whatever it is that we happen to show those people, since we're being so transparent. And then they'll say, oh, well, they really weren't as smart as they were. Here's what we've learned by watching them and watching all of their mistakes. So hopefully some other group in the future will learn from us and all the mistakes that we're making. Those are at least 2 modes that I could see this taking. And there are, of course, more.
Even better if we learn from our own mistakes.
Well, that's the first scenario, okay? That's the first mode.
Well, one thing that Martin may not be aware of, I usually try to remember to save the chat when the sessions are over, and then immediately post it on the Facebook Messenger group that goes with this Zoom session. Sometimes I forget and the session ends. But one of the reasons that I do that is because very often, if somebody brings up a question and I have a response for it, I'll type the response in the chat rather than waiting 20 minutes to respond orally. So very often my contributions are in the chat and not spoken.
So my hand's been up. Yeah, so there were a couple of people, at least on this call, that hadn't seen Martin's invitation. So I was wondering if he could take a few minutes now to tell us what the practical approach would be, so that we could decide if we want to do that. Would that be okay?
Thank you, Stacy. I'll do that now. And Barry, in that recording Stacy's talking about, I thank you for that compliment. But I also thank you now for explaining one of the reasons people might answer something quickly in chat and not bring it up as a mental list later, because in a way it makes our communication less efficient. But in this video where I invite you guys, I say, let's not use the chat, because even if we use the chat in the most efficient way, it's not as efficient as really paying attention and watching the person's nonverbal communication, even when they're not talking. So I would even recommend that, you know, we have a window where all our faces are seen, and as closer would be better than farther away. So I would have to be closer for that time. So you can read my nonverbals, which is a universal language, not just with our species, but other species that share some of the same patterns. So in this invitation is what I mentioned to Sam privately at first, and it is that I chose a life skills lesson from a PDF that I sent him, that I send openly to many people, and some people, like in Africa where I went, they claim to have given it in one place. And beautiful graduation, everybody's well dressed. You know, it took shorter than the time of the program for some reason, and nobody's trained to do it there, so it's kind of weird. But it is about people skills, and it is this one that I chose. It's about what we are like in group, either with harmful behaviors or helpful behaviors. And of course, this incorporates many life skills lessons. One of the most powerful tools is to see ourselves on video and to see what we're really like, because that's when the most powerful learning can happen. So that's a great thing about life skills coaching, is you can't phone it in, you know. You got to actually show up and be willing to be transparent, and within a supportive group that accepts this as a component, it is incredibly supportive, and bigger leaps of progress can occur in the human condition and with us as individuals. So this is a 4-hour lesson usually. So I've split it in two. And usually in my program, I've added a bit of time. So it might actually be that if I rush through it in a group of, let's say, 6 to 8 people and myself in person, it would be maybe 3.5 hours. So I think maybe 2 sessions of 2 hours where I would like to do the homework to prepare for how to give it online and do the workshops where we might split in group to do micro little exercises during this 2 hours. I have to do a lot of preparing and planning to do this. And I'm not motivated to do this unless I confirm some people want to do this. So of course, I put that invitation more than a week in advance to see who's excited about this. And I'll tell you what happened to me when I took this training when I was in my 30s, within about a year that I arrived on Vancouver Island, is I was shocked. I wanted to get fired from my job just to keep doing this 2 months full time to become a life skills coach. And of course, our trainer gave us the exercises and we experienced some of these triggers. And some of the things I noticed is I got angry that I didn't already know these people skills, these human thinking tools for social creatures until in my 30s that I didn't know what this was. I know I wanted to go towards working more in the social industries. And I'm like shocked. How do I not know these things that are incredibly helpful, that would have been helpful in my relationships with spouses, at work, in family? And then I'm like learning this now in my 30s. This was an outrage. Of course, I knew this is worth more than my bachelor's degree, this 2-month full-time course to become a coach. So for me, it's very exciting. So of course, I'm hoping to see this excitement, but the excitement came for me when I'm doing it and I'm realizing these are important. And there are not an infinite number of these types of lessons, but they need to be adapted to, the workplace, the family, leisure, but they're essentially a limited set of skill sets for people, primates, or any other social creatures to be successful. So I'm hoping that people will say, Martin, I'm there. And if, 4 or 5 people say this, then of course I'm going to be starting the preparation so that it goes well. It'll be the first time I'd be given it online. And I'd have to be using Zoom and probably telling you guys in advance, the ones that commit, that, okay, have your Facebook Messenger ready. Because if I split you up in groups of 2 or 3 or 4, or split the group into, your group can meet in this way separately. Because I have to make it work that somehow this lesson, and I might have to adapt it as well, will work with using minimal complications of technology and within these 2 parts. Any questions about what I meant?
I think you're suggesting exercises in breakout rooms.
Yeah, it's not a lecture format. Life skills is very little lecture. Actually, the talking is done more by the participants sharing what they learned, what it felt like for them, and how powerful, and links to their lives. So it's not a lecturer kind of process for sure.
Well, the invitation was open for you to take one of these upcoming Saturdays. So
And it would have to be 2. And the video said that the second one doesn't have to be right after, but I'd want the second one to be less than 3-4 weeks after. And that I'm hoping that the people that commit will do both parts, because it'll provide a better experience for the entire group, that it's not split up in that way.
So I'm curious, since you've given this before, do you have one or more other previous students who would give a testimonial, or at least have been on record evaluating your course?
Well, the teacher that gave the program, after I did my practicum in one place, I volunteered thereafter. And again, she heard very good feedback. So she recommended that I replace her when she was away, which gave me my first staff status at that college that became later Vancouver Island University, which is also where I fired my master's degree faculty in sustainability related topic. And of course, my classmates voted me a Master of Ceremonies. It was a small group, but I think the sense of humor and the fact that I had that confidence, they wanted me to do that. And it's the first time I actually went to a graduation of anything. And for me, it was the most powerful course I ever took. I have un DEC, Diplôme d'études collégiales in Quebec. Didn't go to that, didn't go to my high school graduation, didn't go to bachelor's graduation or master's, but this was a proud moment for me because I knew this was probably the most important course I ever took. And that would, let's say people say you're great as a driving instructor, or you're great working with kids, or you're great this, that. And I could always relate it back to my life skills coach training as being the most important training that 2 months full time, because it had a big component of personal development as giving me the success with anything related to working with people, seniors or people with handicaps or anything else in demographics. So when I gave a field placement course that I designed myself for my master's degree, I created a lifelong learner group, called it the Racketeers, teaching them badminton skills, but also life skills lessons and also leisure and getting along as a small group. And some of them gave me references, these students as well. But the thing is why needing references? Is somebody offering this for free with the testimony I've given so far for how it's changed my life? Why needing so much reassurances? Why do I need to show diplomas on the wall? Why these doubts? Why this hesitation? That's kind of the more important question, really, than seeing references, whether somebody with a PhD or 20 years working in a school or whatever it might be, is I see these patterns where less and less personal development courses are being given. And the last few ones I participated in were definitely overpriced for what we got. And they were too big of a group to have the impact that they would have had in smaller groups. So this is what I have to offer. And for me, I've offered it a lot for the last few years, and I accept to live way below the poverty line because for me, I know what's important is just what makes us human. And what makes us human is a lot of the kind of human thinking tools and behaviors that I'm teaching in this program.
So are you comfortable taking one session and then letting the group decide whether or not they want to do a second?
The thing is I don't mind doing that, but when I say, and it'll be clear, and people will actually, if they do an entire thing where they commit to be present and to give themselves fully to this, which is not giving themselves to me, it's giving themselves to themselves. And if they choose that, it'll make me sad. But the thing is it won't be a surprise, right? It'll be patterns I've been picking up that are accelerating more and more over the last few years. Yeah. As a species that can't save itself, throwing a lot of fancy words out there, but the behaviors never come.
In this course that you're offering to teach, what is the material around ego and pride?
Well, first I want to say that I don't want to use the word teach. It's more like facilitate. And it's somebody that's been trained to facilitate and somebody that can role model some of these things. And these concepts, ego and pride, they come up and they're part of the conversation, and often people mention them as part of the triggers. And if it's a supportive group, and I'm not the only one in charge of making it a supportive group, every participant is. So what I can do is always guide back. And again, I will be good at what I do, but again, I don't try to control or domesticate or indoctrinate. I give opportunities for growth in courses like this, and whether people take them or not, it's up to them.
Well, I'm open. What other people think? Do you want to commit to one, or do you want to commit to two right away?
Yeah, I'm not going to commit to either. If I were to participate, I would be doing it as a favor to Martin. I love the idea of the exercises, but I'm not necessarily sure that I would like to do this particular one facilitated by him.
Anyone else? Would you be willing to say more about the facilitation part, Stacy?
No, only that I think that it's really what he's talking about is really important, and it's I would love to see the exercises. But for me to do it under these conditions, I would be doing it to help him form an online course. And with that, you know, being the clear reason, then I might consider it. But otherwise, I'd like to choose who facilitates the workshops that I attend for my own growth.
Any other opinions? Martin, I still think that we should, if you're still willing, have at least the next week and see who and how participation happens and see how it goes.
I don't know if Joshua and Kayla are still there, and maybe they could just say, okay, I don't have any feedback on that right now, so we can know they're there. Or...
I'm here and I won't be able to commit because I'm going somewhere next weekend. But I'll be more than happy to see what my schedule is like for the next time around if you do a next one.
Yep,
Well,
and I'm
the
here
first
and I
one is
just
not
listened
next
to an hour of clarification and agreements. Nice job, guys.
Wait, what was that? I didn't quite hear that.
He said that he's been here about an hour listening to clarifications and agreements, and he's praising us for that.
Barry?
So, and Glenn is not here today, and Glenn has known me for a few years, and he's mentioned a few times that he'd like to do some of these, but so far nothing has manifested. And again, Sam, if you're saying I should prepare for this with zero interest in it, it is abusive to ask me to spend time on preparing for this. So of course I will not do that because I don't work for other people's attempts to self-sabotage their life. That's not my goal, is to offer myself, and whether they have great growth or no growth at all, for me, I think it's worth the risk, but nobody even wants to take the risk, but they want me to spend hours and hours of time to prepare for this. And for me, that's a pretty sad example of HSD. And I can't be a victim of that. I've cured myself of HSD.
Well, I thought I heard you say that you were hoping to develop an online course.
Yes,
So
I
I don't
am.
think-
And
yeah.
I would succeed at that with people committing, but there's nobody here that is committing to supporting me with this. And Stacy, I would love you to be co-facilitator. I offer people to be co-facilitators, especially if they speak different languages, because then we can grow this program to be offered in different languages over time. So yes, but I mean, for me, it seems like, people are phoning their lives in, that joke from Saturday Night Live. The host didn't do a great job with the opening monologue. It seemed like he phoned it in. Well, it seems like a lot of people are phoning in their lives more and more over the years. And for me, I pick up these signs and I can't invest my time when I see these signs, right? I will invest my time and give my 100%. And I would love, but again, Stacy, I don't want this to be an online course because it's not as efficient. I'm actually making a compromise. This should be done in person. It's the more powerful way to learn these people skills, these social skills, and online would just be a way to kind of hopefully have a good experience to have as an example. But again, I'm not getting commitments here. So, it's not, and even when it's in person, and even when I've given it or people have known these things to be productive to social creatures, I've seen, and HSD has measured, that less and less people choose to prioritize this in their life in person for free. When I'm in Africa, there's a pattern there where people that don't get access to education, and when they do, it's horrible and it's costly, that I'm offering things for free, and people are telling me I have to offer an incentive for people to show up. Well, these patterns are not just in Africa. I'm picking them up, growing in all cultures of the world, where the intellectual laziness, the chauvinism, the procrastination, I'll do it later, while the world is crumbling around us, and this group is about collaborations. It is, for me, it's a lot of evidence and data to put into HSD, you know, and calculate how to chart the future of what's coming for our species.
Kayla's hand's been up.
Kayla?
Okay, thank you so much. I totally hear you. And as a dance instructor, it's very difficult to get commitment from people for me to show up. And I'm bringing that up because it's kind of frustrating. Movement is good for you. Also, learning a new culture is good for you. But at the same time, for my personal interest as a dancer, it really is kind of my passion and my hobby. And it sounds like I'm listening. The more I listen to you, I hear that it's a bit of a passion for you too, if not a lot of a passion for you. The dangerous thing that I would say about that is the word commitment. People like choices. And the more somebody asks me to commit, the more I'm like, whoa, 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 why? It's kind of like a bad date. Like I go on these dates and these guys are just like, oh, choose me. You know, if you give me a chance, you know, then I'll, you know, I could show you what I do, blah, blah, blah. I don't know that person. I don't know if I'm going to like them or not. I don't know if along the line, if I commit my time to it, it's for me or not. It's a gamble. So when I do my dance, I like it to be organic when I teach it for myself. And it's more of a gift. And when I present it that way, like, you know, hey, I've got these Thankful Tuesdays. There's no commitment. If you guys can afford to give me some money, then great. If you can't, just come, enjoy, and learn. And it frees myself of that obligation, and it gives other people who, you know, might be interested in it and can commit the opportunity to do so. And what I'm saying is, I get it. If you want a group of people to be there, then great. But you're also kind of asking a little bit, God, I don't even want to say it like this, asking a little bit too much if they don't really know or understand your concept. And again, for the sake of time, you know, I've had to cancel several dance groups, and it kind of sucks because I didn't want to teach to just one or two people at the time for my own time constraints. So, you know, I don't know why, but I hear a little bit of frustration in your voice about this. I would like to in the future see one of your sessions, but the commitment for me right now is I can't do it.
Kayla, I could hear the passion in your voice, like you can identify with some of the feelings of not just me, but anybody else who's benefited from something, who's gotten good enough to be able to offer it to others, and who've seen others benefit, and then the numbers go down and not understanding, because sometimes last week they gave you feedback you didn't even ask for how great your dance lesson was and how they felt after it, and yet they don't make the choice to do it again, even when you're offering it for free or by donation. And that is the topic I've been talking about for years, is why are we turning more and more like this, and we justify it. And even people that offer these, like you get into these patterns of also not accepting these things that are good for you. And it's happening to all of us. HSD is I'm fighting it off all the time. It's a very, very nasty cultural disease that's affected everywhere. So the passion, I wish I could have seen it, you know, but I heard it. I heard your breathing changed and you were hesitating and you spoke a lot and you made very good points of how it is. And dancing, by the way, you could do it with one person, for example, but it's not the same thing for you, or that person might not even show up next week. It was just you two, even though you might have had a great experience. But these life skills lessons, if I do it with one person, I become a life coach, not a life skills coach. And it's different. So again, it needs optimally between 6 and 8 people, most of these exercises that are under the Saskatchewan New Start model. And that's in the attachment I've sent you, Sam. I don't know if you could send it to everybody else. It shows, you know, what the template of these exercises are. And it's been a successful thing. And, you know, there's professional associations of these things for a long time. And the fact that I don't have any recent videos or references is because it's not because I got worse at offering it or I don't want to offer it, or I'm just getting back into it. It's because less and less people show up to learn social skills. And I'm not taking it personally because that's kind of what I predicted would happen. And again, you're not doing this for me. And Stacy, you kind of, it insults me a little bit, your answer of saying you're doing it for me, because it makes me sad for you that you say this. And I don't want you to feel defensive, but you can, and you can express why you might feel defensive if you want. But the thing is I'm not surprised, and it's not about me. Although, yes, I get satisfaction from this, but I know it's a losing battle. My theory on HSD predicts this is a losing battle, but I'm alive. I woke up sick this morning, but I don't think I'm going to die from COVID. So as I'm alive, I have to keep offering for free things that I know are valuable to the human condition. And it's not a failure that I didn't give the course. It would be a failure that I didn't overcome my frustration to not get participants and stop offering. That'd be a failure. I'm still offering. So for me, I'm proud of myself. And thanks,
Sam?
Kayla, because I think that was hard what you said. So thank you for sharing. Go ahead, Stacy.
Sam, do you mind if I respond? I see your hand is up.
Please, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just reacting to, you made a blanket statement that people are doing this less and less. They may be doing it less and less with you, but I think statistics will bear that people are doing it more and more. I know a lot of people, including myself, that have been engaged in this kind of inner work, you know, all these skills development. So I think that's where you're seeing my resistance to doing it with you. I would do it with you to help you develop what it is you're trying to put out to the world. But I reject the notion that people are doing it less and less, because I don't think that's true.
Sam?
I'm curious what HSD teaches you about your own feelings at the moment.
About my own feelings,
Yes.
HSD is a theory about you know, how people suffer from different human domestication syndromes, and it ends up guiding their behaviors in a particular way that is almost like they're automatons. So I don't know about the question about my feelings. Of course, I'm triggered in various ways, but I mean, as part of my life skills training, I find triggers less painful, and it's not something that I avoid as much as other people avoid. But I've also done counseling where I've received counseling, and I've done counseling to others. I've also got diplomas in mental health. Most of my bachelor's is psychology courses. So it's not just a life skills coach thing, but that's what has been the most powerful for me. And Stacy, I don't know, for me, again, yes, there is data to show how people relate to me in response to this, but there's also what I observe out there as being offered or not offered, and the quality of what it is. And I've noticed as I took life skills lessons in bigger supercharged steroid formats where you pay a lot of money and it's in these fancy hotel kind of rooms, and there's a lot of people, is really, I'm watching this and it's like, it's powerful, but it's really a life skills lesson that would have been better in a small group and doing an entire program and repeating it, because you got to redo it again because you fall out of these patterns of these healthy social behaviors. And yeah, I have feelings with this, but it's not something that I can't handle or that surprises me. And the thing is people might judge my behavior outside of being the facilitator of such a course, and then they'll see how supportive I am as the facilitator of such a course. For example, I loaded me testing one of my badminton students on my YouTube, and you could see how supportive I am and how, you know, that student already knew me. And you might say, well, that's not a life skills lesson, but it's still somebody agreed to be videotaped when they're being tested to do long serves in singles. And if you study how I am and how supportive I am, and how still I don't take charge, they could succeed or fail in this test, is you will see how I am. And a lot of it is accountability. Accountability is a big part of life skills lessons. So it's not all on me. And I know that I will be very proud of how I do if somebody participates. But again, whether somebody does it fully, whether they keep practicing these skills, whether they do the again, more of them, it's up to them. And I would say statistically, Stacy, I would say that even though I didn't collect a lot of data, I think just noticing patterns, I would say the less people are doing this. And what people sometimes consider personal development is not the same as what it used to be considered as personal development. And sometimes it's just people hanging out. Let's say they might do something that is fairly therapeutic, you know, like let's say planting trees or something like that, but it still goes away. And I've done vlogs where I explain that I'm in these eco villages, like on Salt Spring Island, where a Buddhist temple allowed us to do a weekend or a half-week retreat. And I'm noticing we're learning different workshops, how to make our own fire or build a bow and arrow. All these things are great. Then I'm imagining, because I'm noticing patterns between people, right? Toxicity in the social systems there of these people that are all, oh, we're just reinventing how to be better humans. But no, I'm noticing it's missing the life skills component. So I'm thinking if there's a big earthquake, I think we will survive a little bit longer than the big cities down there, but we will still turn our arrows and fire against each other because we're missing the life skills component. There's no global collaboration going on there either. And these patterns are, yeah, go ahead.
So Martin, I'm a little bit unclear. How do you define life skills?
Okay, so is it okay with people that I talk about this today? I don't know if we had another topic or anything. Is that okay?
Yeah, we're
Well,
here.
it seems to be important for you, so I would like to explore that. And give you
Okay,
that.
okay, well, there's soft skills and essential skills. That's what employers hope the employees they hire will already have. Let's say, you know, working with the cash, basic math, phone etiquette, or things like that. That's not it. Then there's life coaches. They often work one-on-one. Often it's a business goal, or it's, you know, money is often involved in this. Then there's living skills. Living skills often related to things we learn when we're much younger, or people with various disabilities. Could be like cooking, you know, balancing a bank account, planning our schedule, making appointments, hygiene. Then there's life skills. Life skills is how we interact with ourselves and others. And what I can do is I could ask you to send my program in the 2-page PDF, Sam, to everybody else, and they'll see some examples of the titles of it and how long the lessons are. And of course, you know, you could look up Saskatchewan New Start model and get some examples of what they're like and what some of the workshop exercises are. And then I added different elements. I added more mental health related because I was seeing mental health as also a global crisis, including caused by people that work in mental health. And I added sustainability because, again, a worldview that is not ecocentric leads us to egocentric. And unfortunately, I'm seeing the best of us going towards egocentric, which is kind of the end of our species and the biosphere. So I'm trying to, you know, try to push back. And of course, there's ethnocentrism in a way, anthropocentrism. There's a lot of issues. And I know it's a losing battle. I've been doing a lot of vlogs where I know I'm living in a life where I can't work miracles. There's nothing I can do to reverse these patterns I'm noticing, but I'm still going to live my life if I'm still alive, and I'm ready to die anytime, but I'm going to live my life that I want to be part of the solution, not part of the problem.
Thanks for answering that question.
If I was very emotional right now, I would have already finished all of my chocolate on this toast here.
You didn't have to be very emotional for you to finish that job.
I have feelings and I manifest them in bad eating habits a lot of the time.
Barry, I haven't heard from you in response to Martin. I'm curious.
Martin probably doesn't know this because I don't think I've mentioned it in any of the sessions, that 1 or 2 sessions he's been in. I have a pretty serious listening disability. I can listen to maybe a paragraph's worth of spoken material in about 5 sentences and get something out of it and then be ready to respond. But very often I'm in front of a speaker who will ramble on for a very long monologue. And after about 5 sentences, the words are just going past me faster than I can listen. Most people talk faster than I can listen, which is why I tend to switch to text, because people can read text if they're interested at their speed. And if I would to read the text or recite the text out loud, I would probably lose most of my audience because I tend to write densely, a lot of information in as few words as possible. So I wouldn't attend a session where there is a sage on the stage who's doing most of the speaking, because for me, it would probably be largely a waste of time. There are very few speakers. One who comes to mind is Brene Brown. I can listen to an 18-minute TED Talk by Brene Brown and get almost all of it. The opposite end of the spectrum would be somebody like Jordan Peterson, who could ramble for 50 minutes in front of 20 students and nobody has any takeaway. A couple of times, well, more than a couple of times, a few times in my life, I've been invited to give guest lectures in front of a classroom, typically a college classroom. And when I do that, I rarely give a presentation. I really have a dialogue, almost like a Socratic dialogue with the class. And afterwards, I typically discover that in a class of 20, 2 people were engaged and learned anything and got something out of it, and the other 18 were along for the ride. And that's pretty commonplace. So the notion of teaching life skills by doing a presentation in front of a classroom, for me, that seems like an inefficient and probably unproductive mode.
Barry, I just want to clear up something I've already explained. So a life skills lesson is I might actually be the one who speaks less than another student who's participating more. So the thing that a life skills coach does usually as speaking is just saying, we're going to do this today and I'll give you breaks here. And usually would explain handouts. And one of the handouts is something that I've seen recently from us. It's like open-ended questions. They'd show the who, how, what, where, and explain just the importance of why these kind of questions starting this way would lead to kind of better kind of conversations. So there's not a lot of lecturing, and usually we sit in a group circle, and what you described before is, let's say there's be a lot of students, is 2 got something, the others were just there, where the others can't be just there because we have to all participate. So it's the best kind of teaching world where it's not lecturing as much as it's guiding, and people show up because they choose to show up, and when they choose to participate, they get the best learning. And it's can't be predicted what's going to happen because it's interactions between people, and sometimes you want triggers with a good coach guiding everybody through these triggers, because the triggers allow for the most progress in these personal development and social interaction training. And again, a good life skills coach would decide, reading their group, we have to read our groups rel, to give maybe a bit more breaks. And sometimes we can do just a little energetic exercises by going outside and throwing a ball and doing some sort of game where we get to know each other in different ways. And that's a break from the circle format. So I think it's something you would enjoy, but I don't know if you've ever participated, because it's not the way we run schools, right? They're not like this. And it's pretty sad that we make classrooms at universities bigger and bigger now. And the teachers are paid more and more, and there's like hundreds of people, and that's not really, it's not really beneficial. So the interactive ways, and one time I was working for a treatment center, and I asked my bosses, can I bring my First Nations bus group to a different kind of meeting that's not AA or NA, it's a secular one? They say, yeah, you can. And that secular support group for addictions was so much better for everybody except one person that complained because they wanted their creator to be part of, their recovery process. Is my bosses said, okay, don't take them there anymore, while everybody else said, No, we like that one. There was more interactions. There was more talking. It's not just like one person at a time. That could be, it's more sharing. And that was more powerful. But because that one person gave a complaint, everybody else lost. So that's an example. That person had unhealthy behaviors in group while the others shared that it was good.
Just to provide some quantitative information about the nature of my listening disability. Somewhere in a prior monologue, you introduced HSD, but at that moment, it went past me. So you've been using the acronym HSD quite a bit, and I have no idea what it stands for. That's my listening disability. So I don't even know what you're talking about.
Well, Barry, nobody really here knows what I'm talking about. So because it's not something I did a lecture on, I wasn't invited. Martin, can you prepare and just talk about HSD? And in that time, I'm not just going to do a lecture either because it's not my style. But I didn't prepare anything. And because I've been posting about this for years and years, and I offer to send people things they can read about it, and sometimes they don't read it when they ask for it, then I'm just going to say that and hope somebody's curious like you and ask a question about it. And,
Well, for example, Martin, I presume that the letters H, S, and D are the initial letters of 3 English words that are in the dictionary, but I don't know what those 3 words are.
Yeah, last time I gave a compliment to Glenn that, because what I did was a big H, a small S, and a big D. That's how I decided to kind of shorten my theory in 3 letters. And Glenn had once said human domestication syndromes, and I gave him the compliment that he's the co-author because I like that term. But what I had written down at first was Homo sapien domestication. And it's when Homo sapiens, which I don't believe exists as a species on this planet, is, and I'm in search of this elusive Homo sapien, and I'm more likely to find the Sasquatch. Even I think Jane Goodall agrees with that, not the Homo sapien one, but the Sasquatch. Oh, so many people have seen it. Maybe it's there somewhere, you know, don't argue too much. But Homo sapien domestication is when the human animal started domesticating the human animal, just like it does with, you know, since the beginning of agriculture in a lot of ways. It's devolved us, and it got to the point we don't even know we're doing it, and we can't even admit how it's devolving us. And there's less and less studies of our different types of intelligence to show that it would be going down. And if anybody ever wants to do a PhD on this, if they succeed at not being kicked out of a school to study this, it would still not be something our species is at all comfortable discussing, that we're devolving ourselves at this time. It's
how does Homo sapiens, what was the third word?
Homo sapien domestication. How do we domesticate each other?
How does that differ from the word to become civilized?
Oh, it's very different. And even
See, Martin, I would have assumed that Homo sapiens domestication is just a cutesy, fancy way of saying to create a civilized culture. To me, that's all it would have meant to me.
Here's one of the things I say in my vlogs is, in traveling the world, I've volunteered and worked and gotten paychecks for different schools in different provinces of Canada and volunteered in other countries, but they weren't school. They were all domestication centers or indoctrination centers. I can't even find a real school, and people don't even realize that it's more about domestication than education.
Well, I'm totally lost. I
Alex
didn't know what the 3 words even were. And now that I know what the 3 words are, I still don't know. I still don't have your concept.
And I want to say about this, Barry, that it makes you intelligent that you're asking about this. And it makes you intelligent that you're genuinely curious about this in front of people. And it makes you courageous, because the explanation of this is super simple, but to actually have schemas to put it all together here when we are all part of this domestication is very, very hard. It takes patience, it takes time, but it is very simple to understand. And once you start getting it and you start being able to observe it in the news or with your neighbors or your own behaviors, you'll see, holy crap, we are doing this to each other. We are now incapable of using less and less of the functions of our brains. And it's accelerating, and it's accelerated way before I was born, that I could tell my theory. That's why I called it last time, Barry, a grand unification theory in the social sciences. It's actually allowed us to explain more about the past that we don't know about our species, more accurately see the present, what's really happening, and also project more into the future. But you have to be able to shift that we're not as smart as we think we are. We're not the center of the universe. There's huge flaws that most of our species, even the specialists, refuse to discuss in ways we think and we act. Once we admit this, suddenly the earth is not flat anymore, it's spherical. It opens up the eyes and things get more obvious. But again, there's this tipping point where people got to ask questions, be open to admit at the beginning, they're like this, they're part of the problem. They have to heal themselves from this. I'm fighting it all the time because I'm a minority. And I had to do it on my own, and I know how overwhelming it is. But eventually, that's what made sense to me when my critical thinking skills evolved, is that's the answer to what's been happening.
So Alex has his hand up, and then I would like to go also.
I thought you were before me, Sam. But
I was, but it probably would be
all right. I just wanted to
a different
mention,
shift. So
Martin was talking about that self-improvement, making a bow and arrow in the bush, you know. And I remembered reading something that bows and arrows were invented 3,000 years BC. They found old bows and arrows and spears. They go way back. So it's a very primitive thing to get engaged with. It takes you back to our roots, I guess, the early days when we were not very sophisticated. But focusing on religion and in group 12-step groups, that's a FERPI, because we're all part of the same creation. If you don't want to call it a creation, we're all part of the same evolution. We're on the same planet. We're going through the same experiences, humanistic or animalistic. We divide ourselves into groups. Unfortunately, we divide ourselves into sects and religions, but we should stop doing that and admit to ourselves on a deeper personal level that the truth about whether or not we're evolved or we're designed by some intelligence is neither here nor there. It's beside the point. The fact is, we don't know. We'll never know. Or maybe one day we might get close to knowing one day when they've got these quantum computers working. They can see through the distances that are involved in the universe, incredible distances that don't seem to end. They revolve back on each other, like that unfortunate quagmire of quantum theory that we sometimes drift into. So I'll leave it at that because I said I'd be short and Sam's waiting. Over.
So Alex, I'm going to apologize to you because I'm not going to respond to you. I'm actually going to respond more to something that Martin said a few minutes ago. Is that okay? So Martin, you said what will be interesting is to see it working, see it in practice. So I'm willing to be a guinea pig, okay, if you're willing to try this experiment. So let's say I have a trigger. I have a trigger because you are, in a sense, trying to get us excited about this course in HSD. And you, as a previous student and an instructor and probably a master at HSD, are trying to convince us to do so. You're meeting with a little bit of questioning, and that has made you frustrated. And you even are vulnerable and self-aware enough to actually, say that to us. And when I asked, what does HSD guide you to do in such a case? I didn't hear a clear answer, in particular about how you feel, right? You said it was a theory, it had to do with the way you think, but it didn't really address how you feel. So I'm triggered, let's say, by watching a master in HSD get triggered and frustrated by not being able to quote unquote sell a course to a bunch of people who really would like to make an impact in collaboration and in, helping the Earth and the planet become more resilient. So I'm seeing a dichotomy there. If you would allow me to say in a little pokey way, that's not been effective today. So I'm curious about how life skills could teach you to be more effective in this situation where right now you're not feeling effective. Over.
Okay, so does anybody else want to say?
I can't hear you now. Can anybody else hear?
No.
Does anybody else want to clarify anything from the question Sam asked, or everybody kind of understands things the same way that Sam was asking it?
Sam and I tend to be perfectly aligned on, maybe perfectly too strong word, almost identically aligned. And when he says something, it comes out of his mouth about the same rate and with about the same information content that I would have articulated with very little difference. That's pretty rare. There are very few people who can speak in a way that I'm in sync with them almost entirely. Most people, I'm so out of sync, I have no clue what they're talking about.
Okay, so Barry, what you're saying is from what I said last time and today, and what you may or may not have seen from what I posted from this invitation for the Humanix, which is life skills. And also at some point I posted the 10 video link playlist on my YouTube of why I call myself the doctor of Humanix. So I'm assuming a lot of people didn't see this, and now I'm asked this, and I would have to separate life skills training and talking about my theory on HSD and how I can use HSD or I can use life skills. And again, a lot of the answers would be to review the things I've already sent or these conversations we've already participated in. So Sam, if you have a question about my feelings, ask me specifically about my feelings in relation to, let's say, an interaction, an event, like you could even say, Sam, when I just asked you about this in a way where it almost seems like you're showing us that you might not be the expert you are, well, how do you feel? And it just me paraphrasing this question, it's an example maybe to show my feelings. But I'm frustrated because things are getting confused, and in part, I could review how well I was with these, conversations to explain things. And again, English is not my first language, but, for me, it's important to use it well. And I think I'm better than average, not an expert, but better than average.
Use English very well.
Thank you. So what I'm an expert at is kind of HSD, but that's my theory. I invented it. I don't know if there's somebody out there who doesn't go on YouTube or the internet or whose book I didn't write who has a similar explanation of things and calls it differently. So I'm an expert of what I want to define, and I've written about it and I've done videos about it. And HSD is not what I was proposing next week. What I was proposing next week is a tiny part of one life skills lesson under the Saskatchewan New Start model that you can look up. And I could send you things. For example, I've sent to the Emperor of Japan the titles of who I claim to be and how I would like to be of service in the country there. And I didn't just send it to the Emperor, but to also different government ministries over there. And it defines things and it adds a little bit of these differences. I could send you this, but you have to kind of read it and you have to maybe ask, okay, I've understood it this way. I would paraphrase, is this what you mean? But you're a little bit, Sam, asking me to repeat myself a little bit because I have sent things. For example, Sam, did you read the PDF that I sent of these examples of life skills lessons? That is 2 pages and it's just the titles, really. It's not even a lot to read because it would give you a lot of an answer there.
You're muted, Sam.
You're still muted, but can I just ask, Martin, is there any way that you could put a link to, because I just looked up the Saskatchewan startup model and all I get is about technology. So if you could possibly put a link.
So
in
the
the
way
chat
it's
would be
written
great.
is Saskatchewan, and then New Start is like one word. It's usually a big N and a big S, but and then put
Try
model
again.
2 and it should pop up.
Okay.
And that's the type of format of life skills lesson that my trainer on Vancouver Island, who had a bachelor's in, I think, mostly education, and I wanted her to be my co-supervisor in my master's degree, and she thought, no, I only have a bachelor's. No, you are worth so much more than these PhD people, and I would have liked her in there. And she was one of the greatest female role models I've ever had. But I've seen her succumb to HSD over time, which is totally different subject than life skills training, life skills coaching. It's totally two different things. There's a lot of things I talk about that are very, very separate. So if I send you guys or send it to, I don't know if there's an email list, send a PDF of that letter I sent to Japan, and then I changed it to send it to New Zealand. It says, this is who I believe I am. And I've already posted a lot of things online to prove I'm not a bullshitter. The proof is there, but I don't want to spend the rest of my life saying, believe me, believe me, believe me, I can do this. I've proven it. No, if people don't want to participate, they don't want to participate. It's not going to change my life. I'm not pursuing money. I'm not pursuing elitism. I just want to be of service. And if your species doesn't let me be of service, that's okay, because I'm documenting my life in my YouTube videos. This is really who I was. And maybe after I'm dead, somebody will notice this is really who this guy was, and maybe not. And it's okay, because I'll be dead. I don't need to know what the answer is. I just need to pat myself on the back when I go to bed at night and say, dude, you were a good dude today. And that's it. I don't need a God to tell me that.
So Martin, in answer to your question, yes, I did read the entire PDF that you did send me. Whoops. Sorry about that. My microphone and video are precariously perched, unfortunately.
Yeah, but you're still live.
Okay, so what I noticed in that were a number of, let's say, chapters or lessons or names of course material. And I also noted the estimate on the time it would take to do some of those courses. I also was able to, in a sense, in my own very rudimentary way, understand what that meant in, let's say, other success industry courses. There's a whole industry about success and life skills and that sort of thing. So it may or may not be true to others here, but I get inundated with a lot of this stuff. Like yesterday, I got another course offer from Jim Quick, who's offering a 30-day thing so that I can actually be a exponentially better person. And then there are others who are actually trying to teach me options trading. And then there's others who try to teach me emotional IQ. And oh, by the way, there's another organization called Productive Learning and Leisure, where I actually did engage in a number of life, shall I say, lessons, if not actually skills. So yes, I've been intensely curious about this particular set of lessons, wisdoms, etc., for at least 3 decades. And so I am actually curious about that. So given that there is curiosity, I said, Martin, why don't you take another session here on Saturdays and present it? Now, you've heard some feedback from others about whether they're willing to commit to 2. And so I'm hoping you actually hear it. I haven't actually heard anyone yet say, yes, absolutely, I'll be there for the first. I will say that. I'll say, absolutely, yes, I'll be there for the first. But like Kayla, there's a lot going on. So I was just curious whether you would be okay with taking 1 session and seeing how it goes. And the other comment about whether or not it is life skills or whether it's HSD or whether it's all about improving oneself as a person. Ideally, my presumption is to be more effective, more successful, more impactful, more happy, whatever those metrics of success are that you create for yourself, okay? And if effectiveness is one of them, that's why I wanted to at least poke at that one a little bit and say, if you're not experiencing the success in selling the course, or that's a very strong term, or at least inviting people to participate in the course, might that be a reflection on any aspect of it, whether it's HSD or life skills or anything about that? That's the case in which I will say, hey, let's take a case study. I'm going to identify that I'm triggered, and let's see what you really want to do practicing life skills and or HSD in this context. That was my invitation to you. Over.
There are a couple of people raising their hands. Should I answer now or?
It's up to Alex whether he would let you answer or whether he wants to go first.
There's a point I'd like to stipulate about the majority of people, the majority of humans and their belief systems in the world represents a large part of the cake. When you're marketing an idea or a course or a seminar, anything you like, when you're marketing to the audience, and that's the human race on the planet, 9 billion people. Now, if 75% of those 9 billion are not interested because your system of philosophy doesn't involve any spiritual aspect, that wipes out the Catholics, the Hindus, the Christians, the Mormons, the blah, 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 yada, yada, yada. So you've wiped out 75% of your market immediately before you've even started. The error number one, over.
Who else had their hand up?
I think it was me.
Okay, you might have been the only one. You might have been one of the two that I saw.
Yep.
Well, that was Heiner, right? Or Alex.
That was Alex.
Alex, your answer is interesting in the sense that a lot of what I say, people don't believe. So when I'm in Uganda and I'm a white guy, first of all, many of them have never met somebody that's not a Christian. They don't even have a schema for that. It blew their mind. Like I was talking to a lady that was finishing her PhD and it's like a tilting pinball machine. She was curious, but she couldn't, it just had nowhere to go. My explanation of not being a Christian. So yeah, it's about schemas, right? It's about understanding, oh, it's not that kind of chair, it's that kind of chair. Oh, this chair can hang from a tree. This one is inflatable. This one's in a car. This one rotates. It's all different schemas. So just the fact that I had different beliefs was very, very overwhelming to people. So that letter I was mentioning, it defines things and we have to separate these schemas. But the way when I am in Uganda and I'm saying I'm as poor as you guys and I can prove it, and if I show them a screenshot of my bank account, because I'm not Christian, they think I'm dishonest, and I'd probably have 2 or 3 other bank accounts with more money and I'm not giving it to them. If only I would give it to them. But what I want to offer is my teachings for free. And so one vlog I did is what would Jesus do, is apparently nothing that nobody would recognize over there because, there's too many, they don't believe the image of what is real. So if I say I'm not pursuing money and we're talking about market, like I don't mind giving a life skills lesson to Christians. But again, for me, the only spiritual component I have is related to the earth. It's ecocentric. It's being one of the many stakeholders on this planet. And if my worldview is ecocentric, and I've collected enough data already that our species is bad for the biosphere and it's showing signs of getting worse, not getting better, that's really my motivation. So again, I've done vlogs over the last few years where I'm getting away from teaching life skills and more towards bringing awareness of an ecocentric worldview. But again, a lot of my vlogs say I will fail at everything that I think is important to be working in my life. And my theory explains why I will fail. And people say, well, they don't understand. My family doesn't understand. I'm not making money. I'm smart. You went to school. What are you doing? And again, I'm adding accountability, integrity, ethics, morals, and this is what I have to do. I'm pretty cured from HSD to not make the kind of compromises that makes me part of the problem so I can have a paycheck and buy a house. That's not who I am, but people have never met somebody like this. And when they take the time to understand that I'm not wearing a mask and that everything I say is congruent and matches up, there's just no possibility for them to grasp the entire picture of an Homo sapien. Because I'm looking for another elusive Homo sapien, and all I'm seeing is Homo communia suffering from HSD. And as much as I can use and make a perfect TED Talk video, it just wouldn't get into their heads. that this guy is really like this, making these choices, which are simple to understand if I have these beliefs and these are my values, but they're so different from the norm that woo-hoo, way out there. I didn't answer every part of your question, Sam. Is there another part that you were asking?
Actually, I'm having trouble understanding the answer in context of my question.
So bring me back to that part.
I was looking for you as an exemplar, a master of HSD and or life skills, and how you're—
That's your words, eh?
That what?
That's your words. It's not my words.
Yes, it's my words. I choose my words. Of HSD and life skills, and whether or not you feel effective in what it is you're trying to get us to do, and what HSD and life skills is actually trying to suggest or guide or apply in such a context, and that you would therefore exemplify.
So what I've noticed is as much, and I've noticed this in that field placement of my master's degree, is as much as I can be very, very good as a life skills coach, I will fail based on participants. Now, of course, that sounds like this guy's not good. He wants to blame his students, but there is a big component of accountability. You can't pay $5,000 and do a personal development course and come out great because you paid $5,000. You have to have the accountability. You have to participate. You have to feel the triggers. You have to be vulnerable. You have to take the chances. You have to do the work. You have to talk about it transparently. All these things are missing more and more among the species. I don't mind being videotaped with how I do. But again, we have to evaluate that the success of a life skills lesson group is as much based on the participants as it would be on the facilitator, if the facilitator meets the basic criteria to do this type of work. You raised your hand for a second.
Yeah, so I'm saying I want to invite you to apply that. I am saying, hey, you get me as a guinea pig. I'm triggered. I mentioned my trigger. How would you actually guide me through this process?
We both have a little bit of triggers with each other because our communication wasn't great and we kind of picked a little bit at each other
That's
in the
your
last
words,
week.
not mine.
Yes, yes, but
Okay.
it's verifiable with our communication, by the way, which we could share, right? So it's documentable. So Sam, like I said before, I can't give a life skills lesson with one person in the format of Saskatchewan New Start model. I can incorporate them. But what I challenge you to do with me that I'd love to do and schedule a time for where the people here don't have to show up. We record it, we post it on the Facebook group later. And it is us deciding, hey, let's choose 4 topics. Maybe we can confirm we don't have the same beliefs or understanding and have a discussion about it and show how we can have fun, pay attention to each other and bring positive attitudes so we can grow in these kind of debatable kind of subjects. That's what I think we could do. And again, there will be components of life skills in there because I know you have some already. You're able to participate in challenging conversations. I'm pretty sure you didn't talk about me in a negative way behind my back or things like that. I think you're capable of transparently participating in this. And if we could do this, that'd be great. I'd post on my YouTube, you'd post on yours, we'd put it on the Facebook group. It'd be us deciding 3 or 4 things that we think we'd be butting heads with and having fun doing it. Would you like to do that?
I would. However, the question I asked maybe half an hour or longer ago would actually quite importantly affect my participation, which is your sense or understanding of how pride and ego are addressed in HSD and life skills. If I understood how you thought and felt about that, then I'd be much more willing to do this.
I am not immune to those things. Nobody is. But the difference between me and everybody else, it seems to be that I'm willing to record transparently conversations. I do it in my family all the time. When the majority get together and they say, the evidence that you're wrong, Martin, is that we are a majority. When I say, well, let's record it and evaluate it together, and they don't want to go there, that says a lot. So my ego or pride are not at the levels that I refuse recordings. And I watch the recordings later. I don't go with the image of how I think it went. Sometimes I watch it many times. And that's one of the ways when I record myself playing badminton, I've put a few where I lose games and I make fun of myself, but there's learning to be done in there, not just by me, but hopefully by the other players if they ever choose to watch it.
I appreciate you saying that. I'm going to go a little bit across the line, and I'm going to speak for others who may not want me to speak for them. But I have observed today that you are a person who comes with a lot to teach. You're very sure that you have a lot of truth that you want to impart to others. And yet you're so sure about it that you view any question about it as a reason for frustration, a reason for being triggered. So I'm thinking, do you really want to take it that way? Or might you actually take it as a reasonable way that people could engage with something that's new? They might be curious about it, but they're not sure right away whether they want to commit 4 hours of their life to it. That's what I'm seeing happening. I'm not seeing a lot of, other criticism other than the fact that they want to be, in a sense, sold. Over.
Does anybody?
I don't want to be sold, by the way.
Sold in a sense that, you want them to commit to this 4 hours.
Right, but Barry has his hand up, but when he's done, I'd like to just address that.
Yeah, Sam and I had an identical question come to mind simultaneously. Sam got to articulate it first about 3 minutes ago, but I want to ask a very simple question that I think has a simple one-word answer, yes or no. Martin, have you, for the past 100 minutes here, have you been practicing and modeling HSD?
I'm going to say no, because we're not talking about the same subject at all here. So I'm going to have to say no. My goal was not
that's a
to
very
model
good answer.
HSD. Yeah.
Because if your demeanor here for the last 100 minutes had been modeling and practicing HSD, then I would want nothing of it. So I'm glad to say that you're not modeling it. But then the next question is, well, then why aren't you modeling and practicing what you believe in?
Does anybody want to answer that? I want to see how people understand the topics we've been talking about so far. Does anybody want to answer that part before I answer more?
No, I'd
would
like you
say-
to, oh, sorry.
I would say I have a similar question. Yes.
Well,
Was it
Josh has his
Stacy?
hand up.
Okay.
Josh has his hand up.
I'm just gonna be direct because I'm a New Yorker, so I'll just be straight up and direct. Just be yourself. Come with you. Don't come with the doctor of anything that isn't you, and just be you. And it's nice to see you, Martin. Good to see you on the call, and that's it. Just keep it simple. And if you got things that you're doing, that's awesome too. Would love to hear about them. Sam's given everyone a chance. He gave me many chances to host Barn Raising, and everyone here is give each other a chance to say what's on their mind and what they're thinking about, and theories and philosophies and systems and models. And we're curious people. I know I am. I'll speak for myself. I'm curious. I'd love to know more about your thoughts and what you come with. And I'll just keep it at that. Thank you.
Yeah, I had just wanted to say that, so first I want to credit you, Martin, because I do see that you have decided that your passion in your life and, how you show up in the world is very important to you. And I can relate to that. And I think everybody here will vouch for me that I'm an extremely transparent person. So I get a little bit poked when you make these blanket statements of everybody, always, but that's beside the point. The issue that I had is that I do see that this is your passion, which I think is wonderful. When I offered to participate, I said that that would be a gift to support you in your passion of being able to put something together and give it to the world. I thought that was generous because I would be lying if I said that I would choose you, mostly because of what Barry pointed out, that I didn't see anything demonstrated that I wanted to get from you in particular. I'm a New Yorker too, but I'm trying to just be straight to the point. one thing, for example, when you mentioned the interaction between you and Sam, and you said, well, it's obvious, we can verify it. You can't verify what was in Sam's mind reading the interaction between the two of you. You can have a suspicion of how he might have felt, but if he hasn't verified it, that's not for you to be able to do. So, you know, those are little things that I recognize. I want to participate with somebody that's going to lead, knowing that they have certain skills, especially of recognizing that they can't be in someone else's head, and that it's up to that person to corroborate what they're thinking. I'm complete.
Stacy, what I was mentioning about between me and Sam was, you know, messages we wrote each other separately, independently. I'm not mentioning what's in our heads. And I'm also mentioning that there were, you know, the last week's recorded session and today's session. And speaking of today's session, a lot of the answers or assumptions I'm hearing right now are answered even within this very thing. So we have to ask ourselves, why are we still, you know, thinking Martin is role modeling HSD when HSD is something totally different than life skills? Why, you know, did Martin already say that he's very different when he gives a life skills lesson? And now we don't like that this conversation doesn't role model that this is a life skills lesson when it's not. You know, all these answers are there. And of course, you know, there's not a lot of this that surprises me. And it's not because I'm in your heads and I have a perfect image of your psychological profiles. It's because I have years and years of things documented. And Joshua, if you want to hear what I have to say more, I could refer you to my YouTube channel, and it makes it that I don't really have to come back here. But if I come back here, I would prefer first, Sam, you and I record something, which doesn't have to be a barn raising session where others would just watch us. It would be recorded separately, and we could start from this. That could be the next step that I do with your group. Just me and Sam recording this. And if you guys want to watch more of my videos or read some of the things where I've explained things, and it's a different way to get it together so it's not misinterpreted in the questions, we can do that, and I can come back later. But again, I'm not selling anything. I don't need to do this. It's just things I'm offering this life skills lesson. I'm offering to talk more about specific things like HSD. But we got to separate. These are all very different things. And there's even more that I mentioned that are very, very different things. And there are ways that I've already written about this to try to separate these topics before we get them together in these social systems. Sam, you raise your hand, I think.
Well, I did, but Alex and Josh also have their hands up, so I'll give them a chance.
I got to admit first that I'm not looking at the chat, and I'm not going to look at the chat today. So I just saw your hand up there because, you know, you actually physically had one up.
I added a chat item that says, what is HSD in one concise statement? One short, simple statement. HSD is the study of blah, blah, blah. Humanistics.
So do you guys want me to answer that now? Or does anybody want to try to just answer that before I do? I just want to see what is understood already.
I mean, what are you
Joshua
going to
talk for a minute.
What do we expect to get out of the course? What is the likely outcome for the student who successfully completes this course?
Are you talking about a course on my theory of HSD?
I'm talking about why you came here and what you've been promoting in the sessions about a teaching, some lessons or some book. You're publishing a book or a course, a teaching. When I call it a teaching because the teachings are interesting. We're all here to learn. And what are you teaching? And what are we likely to gain from learning it? That's just a simple statement we need to hear. Over.
Okay, so last week, the first time I was here, a lot of the triggers Sam talked about, and most of us, including me, have had these triggers where somebody claims to have all the answers for everything, right? Their truth, right? And Sam brought this concept up again because I believe he might be thinking I will be labeled in that category soon, you know, and that's okay. And then Joshua was saying, you know, come as yourself almost, like, correct me if I misinterpreted Joshua, but I am, and I've been stating this, I don't wear a mask. I am myself. Now, this is an unstructured conversation. We talked about this last time again, right? I'm just going with the flow, and I could talk about a lot of different things, but they are different things. And next week was part of a tiny life skills lesson under the Saskatchewan New Start model. This is usually given in person as a group that is small, sitting in a circle, and sometimes breaking away for little exercises that we'll talk about later related to social skills, people skills, and how we can get better or worse at interacting with ourselves and others and talking about this. That's what next week was about. Now, I've never prepared a course on HSD. I've written a little bit about it, and on purpose, I've never made it clear and I've never focused specifically on it. And one of the reasons is again explained in my YouTube channel, where slowly I'm creating schemas, slowly over time, for somebody to put all this together. Imagine meeting a tribe somewhere that thinks the world, and for generations, if not thousands of years, they've never come across a different idea, and they believe the earth is flat in this way, and their ideologies are so far from what is obvious to our kindergarten kids. Imagine trying to have a conversation in this way. And I'm not saying that HSD is complex, but I'm saying when people are in it, it's not like they're going to go outside and look at themselves easily and see what it's look like to be in this. So again, it's schemas. So we're talking about a lot of different things, and I am myself, and I can talk about myself very openly without stressing out or needing preparation in advance. And that's all I can offer you guys, and I'm pretty proud about it. I'm just being me, and I don't need friends. And I want friends. I'm a social creature. I'm a normal social creature, but I don't need to recruit. Watch my videos on YouTube and try to find one where I say subscribe or like or notifications. And it's one way you can tell I don't suffer from HSD, because if you guys don't want to subscribe, don't subscribe. It's totally okay with me.
Josh?
Well, I feel like I'm crystal clear. Thank you so much, Martin. I got what you're coming with, and I'm clear. So that's, I get it.
I used to suffer from a condition. I used to suffer from a belief syndrome that there was a reason for life. There was a reason why we existed, a deeper meaning to life. But it was beaten out of me by atheists, a small group of people, about 17% of the world population, who have no belief of any supreme divine creator or intelligent designer. They think life arose spontaneously, accidentally. There's no meaning at all. And that I find difficult to believe, because meaning is an emotional aspect of my existence. It gives me a reason to get up in the morning and do stuff. And the meaning I have of being a part of the community is by being involved and taking action, becoming a cog in the mechanism and creating change from within. And I guess a lot of people would agree with that suggestion. So I'm willing to ensure that I'm not suffering from this HSD, whatever it is. I still don't know what it is, like Barry mentioned, but it's a human condition. And humanistics reminds me of animalistics. It's just humans are adaptive. Humans are more intelligent. Something happened to the human race that changed us from the animalistic endeavors that we were once part of before we started walking upright and using tools. Over.
Sam?
So one comment is it's already 10:03 as Stacy observed. So I will do mostly listening from here on out. But one thing I did want to say was in response to your comment about just showing up as yourself and that you don't have a mask on. When I first encountered your title, and in fact, it's in your rectangle right now, is you are the Doctor of Humanics. I don't know what that means, you know. And since there isn't a known body of knowledge called humanics, which you are offering to teach us, we don't a priori come and understand what that is. Moreover, we don't know who granted that doctorate, whether it was you yourself or whether it was someone else, whether it was your, you know, great female mentor, whoever it was, we don't know. So couldn't you just leave that off? Just come as Martin, rather than confuse as the Doctor of Humanics, which might look, and to me it does look, like an attempt to accredit yourself in a way that gives you more stature, more reputation than you yourself as an individual come with, which is sufficient, you know? So that's why I'm saying, when you're looking at what someone believes, how they talk, how they behave, how they react, if that's all in alignment, people would be attracted, you know, to all this by the billions. But when Barry and I ask, are you exemplifying HSD? Are you exemplifying life skills? Are you exemplifying the best of what you're offering to teach? And you're saying, no, I don't do that. And Barry and I are asking, why not? Why wouldn't it be? If it's so valuable and so truthful and so effective, why wouldn't you? That's where the alignment doesn't appear to be in place. Over.
Okay, so I want to explain that when Barry asked that question, he mentioned HSD. He didn't explain, he didn't use the term life skills. Are you role modeling life skills? Which I believe I mostly am right now. And
But I did ask that.
No, well, you just said HSD again, which is a very
No.
different thing.
Before that, I mentioned both.
So let's say I am proven to be entirely congruent. But if what I want to say and what I am providing proof about is pretty discouraging about the state of the human condition, I'm not going to get a whole bunch of people come my way.
Why not?
So well, like, do you gravitate towards people that say, you know, things are not going to get better, they're going to get worse?
I gravitate towards people who speak the truth.
Well, that's pretty much what I do. Now, you mentioned the Doctor of Humanics. I posted on the Facebook group the playlist of the 10 things where I claim I deserve this title because of this. After you watch this, get back to me, because I can tell you haven't based on how you've asked that question. What else? What else before we go?
Real quick, I was in a conversation last night with my ontology group, and we were talking about a thing called the Drost effect. And the Drost effect is when there's a picture within a picture within a picture. And what we were talking about is called meta-circular evaluators. And so that's when the self-interpreter is a meta-circular interpreter, where the interpreted language is nearly identical to the host language, and the two terms are often used synonymously. And that's what I'm hearing in this conversation is you're meta-circling around. I'm a human talking about human dynamics or humanics or whatever you call it, but I'm not talking about humanics. I'm talking about humanics, but I'm a human who's trying to be human, who's learning humanics. And it's the Drost effect. It's circling, and you're going circular, and you're interpreting about being human, but I'm not doing the course.
Joshua, you're the first one to, you're bringing words I haven't really used or known before, but you're the first one to kind of point out that I never get to the point of, see, that's what I mean by humanics or whatever, because it's not a simple answer. Everybody wants a simple thing to complex things. And sometimes what makes it complex is not the concept is complex, but the mind is wired for very different things that fits the norm and not a different way to see things. Again, imagine a time when most people believe the earth was flat and the guy has a very simple explanation of why the earth is spherical. Now, when it comes to Eumenix, you're saying, yes, in a way, I talk about wanting to talk about Eumenix, but I do want to talk about Eumenix. And one way that I had planned at some point to make rules of Eumenix, and Eumenix, one of the ways I could define it here is Eumenix, again, going back to Isaac Asimov's reference, which I said last time, right, is it's more like patterns of responses or effects of certain events or interactions between people. It's patterns. It's noticing these patterns. What are the rules or laws of Eumenix based on Isaac Asimov when he talked about it in his science fiction books? So if I ever had a group where I could give this entire course that Sam received in PDF, I would say at the beginning, hey guys, we're going to have a flip chart here. And one of us realizes this must be a rule of Eumenix, that there is a pattern. Then when these events happen, most people tend to respond a certain way. Well, that's one of the ways I would define Eumenix. Now, of course, intuitively, I've noticed I'm not that bad at knowing these things intuitively, but I've never had somebody that collaborated with me in a way that we suddenly wrote them down, because it would take time. It would take an objective view of ourselves as an honest, transparent group and pick up and say, yes, I believe outside even of our group, the pattern is most people would respond in this way. Now, when somebody gets good at this, it leads to things like HSD, my theory on HSD. Many things led me to the obvious theory of HSD to me. And that's one of the ways how people respond to certain things.
So to stop the circulating going around, Martin, what is your theory on HSD in 2 sentences?
Yes.
Same thing I've said before. It's a theory.
Take your time. Take your time. 2 sentences. Take your time.
A theory that describes what happens when the norm succumbs to various forms of human domestication syndromes. And in that theory, it shows how our brains are devolving.
Excellent.
Can you put that into your own words, Joshua? Or, say it back to me in your own words.
Sure, I'll do my best. As a brain devolves, so it's postulating the hypothesis that in human condition, in human dynamics, the brain is devolving and humanity is devolving into something. He hasn't stated what that thing is, but it is devolving. And in the conversation between humans, you note the system of de-evolution, of devolving in the dynamics itself.
Is devolving a synonym of degenerating? Becoming worse?
I don't know, ask Martin.
I want to use the word devolving. Joshua, Barry, thank you for asking for a paraphrase. Joshua, thank you for the bravery of a paraphrase, because what you offered is something that eventually people realize is that the more we've domesticated each other, the more our brains have devolved, the more it's easier for us to keep domesticating each other and devolving our brains. So this is a feedback loop. It's a positive feedback loop meeting a negative outcome for our species, which might not be negative for the biosphere, by the way. The biosphere might do something more productive with our devolving species.
So a vicious
I
cycle.
think Alex has
instead
his
of a
hand up.
virtuous cycle.
I didn't hear what.
Alex has his hand up.
No, what did you say, Barry?
So a vicious cycle as opposed to a virtuous cycle. Devolving, degenerating, getting worse and worse over time.
That's what
That's
happened.
your hypothesis that you're calling the HSD theory. Is that correct?
After Alex, I can use a metaphor, but go ahead, Alex. And I think Stacy has her hand up too.
The metaphor that Martin used was the feedback loop, because the answers that prevent this feedback loop from devolving us even further are not forthcoming. And I want everyone to know that I was devolving for a long period of my life until I came across a 12-step self-help group. And the self-help group got me to pause long enough to have a moment of clarity and realize that I needed to stop devolving if I wanted to progress and have a successful life and be able to teach this knowledge, be able to pass this knowledge on to others, because a lot of it was wide. A lot of it was clearly very was people with deep spiritual beliefs leaving their religions behind, because we all know that religions divide, and its power structures and dogma, and goes way back. The new way forward is the spiritual belief that we are all human part. We're all part of this one species that's destroying the planet, and we need to change our ways. There's no getting around it. That's simplicity. It's Occam's razor. Global warming and overpopulation and resource destruction, forests, farms, and the oceans are depleting and seriously in danger of causing the total collapse, ecosystem collapse. If we don't come together and admit that our little petty differences about our spiritualism or lack of is what's a thorn in the pie. It's a thorn in the side. It needs to be removed, excised, and we need to get along with each other better by agreeing that our egos take second place to the ecosystem. So, good teachings, and simplified and straightforward and open.
Here's once. So,
Hold on one second. I think Stacy has her hand up, and then I had my hand up, and then you can go, Martin.
Am I allowed to go to the bathroom just to pee for 2
Yeah,
minutes?
go to the bathroom.
Or is this
Go for it.
directed at me, the next question, or can you wait for that one and I'll be back in 2 minutes?
Go to the bathroom.
Okay.
You can watch it on the recording anyway.
Yeah,
so.
don't worry. I'm not bringing my laptop with me.
It's not.
I will definitely watch this recording many times. It's
Yeah.
on my YouTube. It's very productive. Thank you.
Get a bucket.
So mine is not a question. I just came back because I just wanted to, I agree with the last statement that Martin made in term, and I think most of us would, that there are certain patterns that we can see that have been happening in societies. So with that very broad statement, I just want to say some patterns that I've noticed. One is that I think role modeling is the most effective way of teaching. And that I've also seen that people who ask for a question, the answer to something, are more likely to receive that answer. So I personally have tried to learn to wait for somebody to ask my opinion before I give it. That seems to be helpful. On the negative loop, I think that sometimes the problem we face is that it's difficult for us to give what we would consider negative feedback. We may not want to hurt somebody. So we don't always tell them exactly what we might be thinking. And, there's good, and, sometimes that's probably a better thing. It really depends on, first do no harm. When Martin referenced when Kayla was speaking that he noticed her breathing change, and he kind of assumed that there was a certain feeling she had that was causing that change. She didn't confirm that. I kind of know her. I would guess it was a little bit different, but again, that would be for her. But I just wanted to make those points that part of the struggle is the difficulty in giving honest feedback. I'm just going to repeat real quick since Martin's here. Part of the struggle is people have trouble giving what they consider negative feedback. They don't want to be hurtful. And the other thing is that the best way to teach something is to role model it. And the best time to give an answer is after a question's been asked. And thank you. I'm going back to do what I need to do, but I'm listening.
For the record, I was cleaning. That's why I sounded like Darth Vader. So thank you for bringing that up, because I was quite embarrassed.
Thanks for the clarification, Kayla. And I was just going to clarify the word that Martin was using a lot with the dynamics was also domesticated. And the way I understand domesticated, I started a fermentation company with some friends in Ojai, and there were different ways to ferment. And you can take vegetables, and one of the things you can do is you can wash off the vegetables and then ferment them. So when they come from the farm, all of the bacteria that's on the vegetables, the wild, undomesticated bacteria, gets washed off, and it gets fermented with the the bacteria that's inside the vegetables, not outside the vegetables. And then there's wild fermentation, which is the opposite of domesticated, if so I understand it. Wild fermentation gives the chaos of all the bacteria that's on the vegetable outside. And the difference between the two is very big in the end result of the fermented vegetable itself. So what I understood you saying, Martin, is in the human dynamics, with domestication, you're taking and shredding away all of the things that make a human wild, and you're having conversations that are domesticated, and you're in a loop, a feedback loop of domesticated, if you will use the analogy, fermentation of the conversation, as opposed to a wild, undomesticated understanding of human dynamics. And tell me if I'm even coming close to your understanding of domestication of humanity.
Well, I want to apply the word domestication more broadly. Your metaphor is interesting, and I'm in a lot of ways and in a lot of different topics. I'm not sure it's the best one or the simpler one, but here's one thing I wanted to say before. We talked about education of quality all being pro that. So when there's more and more of us domesticating our own children without even knowing how we do it, at levels we're doing it, in the counterproductive ways we're doing it. When we're doing this, we are every generation devolving the potential of the human brain. So we're getting dumber at various forms of intelligence, which we don't even want to talk about different forms of intelligence. We usually want to talk about the one that makes a good worker bee for a paycheck to come in. So these are positive socio-cybernetics. So that means that the more we do it, the more it accelerates the devolution of our species. Now, there are things that would be a negative feedback loop, such as quality education. But again, we can't just talk about quality education, and we can't just do the theory of quality education. We have to work hard if we care about our kids and this planet for the rest of our lives, just to try to swim a little bit against the river to do the practical parts of quality education. That would be an example of a negative feedback loop that could fight against HSD.
So you're saying that HSD, I'm understanding that as human dynamics of fighting against a system that is telling people what to think, what to do, and how to act. The opposite of doing that looks like what? That's my question to you, Martin. What does it look like if you're not doing that? There's a lot of ways
it looks different, and I hope that you will become somebody who will passionately not want to see how that can look different, but want to manifest the different with me or not.
Yeah, if you got to know me, I did when I was a kid. I actually wrote a book when I was 5. And when I was 8 years old, I decided that domestication that they were trying to put me in, that pen, I was the first legally homeschooled kid in Cambridge, Massachusetts, because I decided not to be domesticated. But that's just me.
Do you know that when I work with kids, like recently in a local school board, do you know that I can tell at very, very young age, like they're this tall, that they know they're being domesticated, and I could see their little hearts breaking and their little traumas. And part of it is because they're curious and they just want to express themselves and share their ideas, but they're not allowed. Do you know how painful it is for me to work in the education system when this is majoritively what I see? I cry a lot of the times I come back home. And the other teachers don't. It's the norm. But man, my heart is broken every time. So bravo for fighting that in your own way and be an example of it.
Yeah, I did the same thing. I cried for 1 year in 3rd grade because I had to put my head down. And then in 4th grade, I decided I don't want to go to that system. And I found out there were laws actually on the books that I could not decide not to go to school, because they would put my parents into jail for truancy.
Wow. That's so domestication has evolved pretty toxic in that society. But isn't it sad that a child has to advocate for their own brain at that age when most adults are not? Or most adults have structured societies where the adults could get in trouble to advocate for your brain.
But that's just one society in one part of the world.
Oh,
I mean, I happen to be in that
worse
part
than
of the
you
world.
think. It is even worse in the part of the world that you're from. If
Well,
you
I'm
really
sa-
dug into this
well,
and how it got
I don't
worse.
know if it's worse. I don't know if it's worse because I've never lived in all parts of the world. I've never lived in all societies. There's 190 countries that are recognized. I'm sure there's a lot more countries that are not recognized. And within each country, like America, there's 50 different states. And then there's many, many counties and many,
Yeah,
many cities. I was just in
Joshua,
one called Cambridge, Massachusetts.
if
So there's
I,
a lot of different societies. So I don't know how they all structure
well,
the human dynamics in
if many,
education.
if many people accepted HSD and somebody decided, okay, I'm spending the rest of my life to show that this is the same everywhere, that's my career. But when you accumulate enough data, you don't have to travel the world to confirm what is obvious. Same thing, Sam talked before about, you know, information overload. I've heard so-called experts of critical thinking complain about information overload. No offense, but you shouldn't complain as much as the norm. You're supposedly an expert in critical thinking. So in a way, critical thinking is the solution of information overload, except that it's not growing critical thinking, which will result in more information overload. And some things they would, kindergarten kids from 25 years ago would know that's ridiculous. What is the norm now accepting as adults?
I think Barry's got his hand up and Alex has his hand up.
In the interest of precision critical thinking, I would point out that the terms positive versus negative feedback loop is actually a bit ambiguous. I would look for a convergent feedback loop, one that does not oscillate, does not go chaotic, and it does not diverge to calamity.
So so there's a lot of things you talk about, Barry, I'd like to hear more about. So I will try to contact you, you know, on the Facebook group, because you've talked about things in your part 2 last time, where you compliment me at one point. And if I can get your permission now, I want to post that compliment on my YouTube and dedicate it to my grandfather, who introduced critical thinking, not because he knew what it was, just because he challenged the norm. And that for me was the basis of, okay, because the norm is often wrong. And so, yeah, so if it's okay, I'll post that part, which talks about, again, the laws, the protocols, all this. I want to understand it because I know my brain's capable, but you use language and you've defined it a way that would elevate my own understanding of my brain, of my theory. So I want to have these conversations with you. When you talked about the feedback loops right now, again, it's language I don't use. I don't know of an example that I could paraphrase it back to you with. So I want to have more conversations with you about this, because you would help me understand more of the things I want to talk about.
Okay.
My contribution to that engagement is the importance of the structure, the 3D structure of what happens when we act in the world, in the real world, where actions have consequences. There's always a simple analysis that can show us where we went wrong and which way we should have gone wrong. And in the spiritual realm, there's also different aspects that are simple, but if they don't come together and they're included, then the thing falls apart, and there's a breakdown in the process. There's a breakdown in the coherency and the evolution of the metaphorical phenomena that we seek. If we seek, are we all seeking answers? Are we seeking spiritual truths? Our own values dictate how we're going to progress on that front, because spiritual awareness involves your own heartfelt emotional response to what's happening in the world. Some people have fundamentalist views which are very tied to religion, and that's a problem because they tend to want to fight rather than work on a solution. Over.
Thank you, Alex.
Joshua, do you have something? I wanted to answer Alex after.
Yeah, I just think what Barry said was really good about convergence and when I hear you speak, Martin, I hear a lot of, I'm pretty sure things are diverging as opposed to converging. And when you go into it's diverging or divesting or devolving, or it's spiraling down, it's going in the wrong, in a one direction vertice, if you will, from a scientific standpoint, it's going in this trajectory without, if you're sure that it's going in this direction, and then you're telling everyone, I see it going in this direction, but if other people see it going in multiple vertices out in multiple directions, then we can have a really great conversation and see if those two directions eventually come back and converge back together, as opposed to everything going in this direction.
Would we only have a good conversation because it seems more hopeful, that type of conversation?
No, we could find where the vertices actually intersect if they do at some point. If not, they keep going. It's gravity. So you're pulling the whole conversation into this direction by saying, this is the direction I see it going. So that's the narrative that you're creating that pulls it into that direction, as opposed to keeping it open and listening to other vertices that are diverging off into different directions that could eventually converge. And I think that's the key is, like I was saying, yes, I see what you see about humanity devolving and certain norms that are incorrect. But then I also see, I was fortunate enough in my life later on to travel to different parts of the world and see many different ways that children are talking to each other and being educated. And I got to see a lot of ways that were not the way that I grew up in the public school system in Cambridge, Massachusetts. So I got to see different ways that children were being taught and see that it's not the only, the Western thinking isn't the only thinking in the world. There's 1.6 billion people in China, 1.4 billion people in India, and there's another 1 billion people in the Middle East, and they think very differently than most Western European countries or North America, Canada, America, and also South America is a whole nother different part of the world that has many different cultures that are all on this one continent in South America that teach their kids very differently. So by seeing those differences, I realized that it's not all devolving in one way, but the power structure of money seems to be pulling systems of thinking into a direction. But unless you can travel and really experience, how kids are taught in the rainforest of, say, Brazil or Ecuador, it's hard to see what's going on all over the world. And it's hard to understand in the Asian cultures. If you go over into Eastern thought, the adults are treated very differently. You have you speak completely differently to someone older than you because of an older culture of respect towards your elders. So even if you think something differently, to say that would be, breaking the norms of society in Eastern culture, to talk to a person older than you in a way that you know more than them. So it's very different dynamics is what I'm trying to say. There's many different trajectories, and humanity is not devolving, it's evolving, in my personal opinion. And with that, I'm complete.
I'll give you a concrete example of a convergent feedback loop that probably everybody would recognize. A lot of species of animals have mating dances. Mating dances can be, positive and negative motions, getting closer, getting further apart, moving around. A convergent mating dance converges to mating. And if it doesn't converge to mating, the two creatures go their separate ways. So it's in nature. It's even though we have very arcane mathematics of feedback loop analysis, you can see it in a mating dance. It converges or not.
Barry will always find a way to bring the conversation around to sex.
You're looking for compatibility. Are the two characters in the mating dance mutually compatible so they can mate?
As a land mammal psychologist, when somebody like Barry says stuff like this, I first envision my own species. So I'm imagining in a bar, there's things happening, and sadly, they might reproduce. And sadly, they'll reproduce in ways that will devolve their species because they have less and less parenting skills. They push less and less lifelong learning worldviews because they can't role model it. And these dances include things I would never do. And for me, they're inhumane. So that, before I think of other species, I do that aspect. Now, I'm seeing a lot of people passionate about a lot of topics. So what I'm going to do is, Sam, I'm going to send you, I don't know if you have everybody's email list, documents I've already written to at least answer a lot of things I would like to say, but I want to hear more what people have to say, because there's a lot of interesting things. Alex, you were talking about the meaning of life as a spiritual kind of thing, and also my life and how to guide. And that's different. We have to have our different perspectives. Like Joshua's evaluating.
Concept.
Hmm?
A spiritual concept of life.
Yeah, and I understand that's a part of our species. So if we think life in the universe is about this, it's very different than my life or my species' life, or the concept of life on this planet based on the environments and chemicals available in the biosphere right now. So yeah, so our species may be devolving in a way that serves the biosphere later. There are various time-related aspects to study this. If it's all about me or my kid's life, yeah. And Joshua, when you're evaluating education in other places, are you evaluating for the long-term success of our species not destroying the planet? Or are you comparing it to your own experiences? And if so, is it so specific that what was failing for you is good somewhere else, that you might not see all the horrible somewhere else? There's a lot of different perspectives. And again, I can handle the negativity of what is coming in my lifetime, and mostly for a few generations for my own species. But I like to run longer term projections, including what is good for the biosphere, because I do not think, for example, that a large quantity of our species dying would be good for the planet if we don't decommission nuclear power plants. And I think also that it's possible that bacteria that evolve and viruses much faster than us should be setting themselves up in our gut to digest our plastics. That would be, signs of intelligence, or at least of an evolved cybernetic system on this planet that would compensate for our failures. But our failures might have been an attempt for life to try something as it became a bit more aware of itself as a global biosphere, to try to not feel so lonely or reproduce on other planets by having us go there. But if we go there and we just destroy here before we go there and destroy the other place, then the Earth, if it had a goal with us as a global reign, let's say, to not feel so lonely, let's say, and these are, speculation, long-term projections, I still think that it's possible for our devolution to be used in a way as a species that benefits the biosphere. So not everything about the way I think is totally, like the kind of sci-fi movie that is, apocalyptic, because I have an ecocentric worldview. I'm capable of seeing ways that our species, and it could be the same thing as happened in the past, our species devolving now could be the basis of something better from us later.
Right. The whole question of, are we cocooning and turning into butterflies, or are we just cocooning and dying? And it's a hard thing. This is the global problems. This is what we started here, trying to figure out the global situation. But I think what I've come across with is it's all individual, because each individual is a part of the whole, and there's a giant system that is almost impossible to see without having all the information. For example, one of the big events that happened this week was the largest factory ever built in the world was opened up this week in Austin, Texas, and they gave a big presentation about this factory. And if you turn it on its side, it's almost twice the size of the Burj Khalifa over in Saudi Arabia. And it's the biggest factory that's ever been created ever. And it's using the most efficient first principle rules to completely re-engineer what an automobile is in a way that's effective, efficient, and good for sustainable Earth, using a technology of batteries that have never been created before, with dry cell battery technology that's more efficient. It's collecting rainwater, it's got solar panels on the top of the factory, and it's stamping and producing vehicles that can run, more efficiently. I can't say enough about how well engineered these vehicles are. They're die casted in two pieces, which take away a lot of the shipping and manufacturing of 150 different parts by casting it into one piece and using a much less carbon footprint in order to create these vehicles, and then running them off of solar power from the sun, which is amazing on itself. But then on top of that, actually taking out the human element of driving the car itself and allowing humans to do other things and have these conversations, and thus recreating what it could be to have actual roads, which is, you know, all of the carbon footprint of putting asphalt onto roads. These vehicles could drive under the ground because they're not combustible engines and they're not giving out toxic materials which kill hundreds of thousands of people, all of these particulates in the air, yada, yada, yada. There's people doing amazing things in the world right now. And I think it's important to see the big picture of what's possible, and not just take engineering and science and manufacturing, but look at human engineering, social engineering, and the way we have conversations in a way that we can change it to first principles thinking and start having conversations in new ways that are wild and undomesticated. So I think with that rant, I have to say I'm complete, Martin, because I have to call my mom and work on getting wires for our new house. Our
Listen
house
to
burnt
this
down.
for a second, Joshua. Listen to this.
Sure.
Before anybody else speaks, I want to say that what Joshua just talked about, for me, shows that we are doomed as a species. And I can explain why from this simple subject, but I want to hear about what people have to say about
we
this.
might be doomed, but I got to get some electricity into my mom's house because we got to build it. So whether it's doomed or not, she's got to plug in her devices into the house, and we have to buy Romanex 10-3 wire, and I'm trying to make sure she doesn't get ripped off at Home Depot. So I got to go take care of that. So thank you guys so much. Very good to see you, Alex, Stacy, Sam. Thank you, Martin, for coming, and thanks for your curiosity. So let's just continue being curious. Thank you.
Alex, did you?
There's a part I wanted to mention that is sometimes neglected, and that is the fact that we are individuals operating alone, and yet it'd be more effective if we were a group operating as one together. But the thing is, action speaks louder than words. You know, the suggestion I made was, why don't we focus on action? Are we doing enough? I ask myself this question: am I doing enough for the global challenge collaboration? Am I encouraging this this unity? And am I using the technology effectively? Am I trying to be more accurate with my model making? I made this model out of bamboo, and each part was cut all in one action, so they're identical lengths, and that made it easy to get the model accurate and looking properly. So the thing is, when I take action, I'm always thinking about what the result is and what was the instigating thing that got me started. What was the problem I was trying to solve, and why was it a problem? And what am I going to do about it? They're the three aspects that every coach, every master coach will tell his students. What's wrong? Why is it wrong? What am I going to do about it? That gets you out of a rut, especially if you're suffering from mental illness or depression or anxiety or whatever. And I know what's wrong. What's wrong is that the pressures on the environment are too great for anyone to know how to fix. So we need to stop making batteries, even if they're dry cell batteries, and they're still for cars to drive around and cause heat. We're all little heat engines. Every one of us is a little heat engine. So, you know, wind power, I think, and wave power from the oceans is a better solution than batteries and electric cars. But we have to get around, and we have to transport our supplies to the supermarket. Otherwise, the shelves are bare. So, you know, there are things that have to be done, and they're heating the planet. So if we stop doing those things, we all die anyway. So how about we think it along the lines of a group that's large in members, a group that's large in numbers has more voting impact on the decision makers who are the people causing the problem. They're not taxing the right companies properly. And, you know, if you put your hand up and say we should have a fuel tax, an energy consumption tax, people say, oh, no, that'll stifle growth. That'll cost us jobs. Well, we've got to do it, because if we don't stifle growth and cost us jobs, we're kaput. You know what I mean? So they're not going to make those decisions until groups have greater numbers of members, and they can see by these numbers, they do the maths, you know, and they say, oh shit, we're not going to win this election because everybody's voting for the Green Party. And that causes change. Become a change maker. Don't do what I say, do what I do. Over.
I don't know if you can hear the racket. There's a hailstorm underway right outside my window. Can you hear the hail coming down? So I don't know if I can say anything and you can hear me over the hailstorm or not. But last week, Martin, you on more than one occasion, I think, spoke about multiple intelligences. And I wanted to chime in, except that I typically don't get very much airtime in these sessions because other people are much more anxious to pipe up than I am. I'm much more likely to just leave a note in the chat. But when Howard Gardner, and I'm a big fan of Howard Gardner's theory or catalog of multiple intelligences, the last two that he added, the most recent ones that he added, I think are the two most important ones for not going down the tubes as a species. And one of them is very rare, and I'll mention that in a second. The other one is not rare, but not practiced very well. The last two intelligences that Howard Gardner added, the ninth intelligence, he really struggled to come up with a name for it because people have been pressuring him to add the ninth intelligence, but there were so many different synonyms for it that it bugged Howard Gardner about how he should name it. He eventually ended up calling it existential intelligence, which overlaps sustainability thinking, which is a very modern term, and a lot of theology, because an awful lot of theology was the pioneering use of this ninth intelligence. For me, my favorite term is systems thinking. My preferred term of art for the ninth intelligence is systems thinking, and it turns out to be the rarest kind of intelligence in the population at large. There are very few competent systems thinkers, which is why our existential intelligence is so rotten, why we're doing so many practices which anybody who had any common sense would say, we need to stop these practices. These are going to send us down the tubes. The last intelligence that he added is one that I think is very important, Martin, and that's pedagogical intelligence. How to do the education process a whole lot better than we've been doing. And so if you take those two, systems thinking intelligence and pedagogical intelligence, that's what's going to save us if we're going to save ourselves. Well, and by the way, existential intelligence includes ethical reasoning, because ethical reasoning is a very high level application of model-based reasoning. But you have to have models of how humans behave. And if you don't have good models of how humans behave, conventionally, your ethics is going to be off the mark.
And an altruism concept that goes beyond our own genetic blood relatives too, for a system to be resilient and to evolve, because systems evolve. Part of the balance is an evolution to a more complex state. But for that, they have to exist long enough to reach these things.
And the existence proof is that in the technology sector, we have very sophisticated systems operating with very sophisticated and advanced mathematical models and scientific models. And if you can do it in the technology sector, that's evidence that it could conceivably be done in the human sector. in governments and human systems. And human systems is lagging way behind the technology
But
sector.
do you see the paradox in it though? The more we develop this technology, the more lazy our brains become. So by the time we have a template, we will be totally inefficient in our brains to apply it.
That's why we need to educate people to systems thinking. You know, I never learned musical intelligence. Okay, I never learned athletic intelligence, you know, kinetic body kinetic, but I can appreciate good music and good art. So it's okay with me if people don't become proficient at mathematical reasoning or model-based reasoning, but I would like our education system to induce appreciation for model-based reasoning and systems thinking. And then maybe our politicians would be more prudent and more attentive to the people who have those skills.
And that economics is an evolutionary dead end.
Yeah, exactly. So that's where, so to answer Alex's question, that's where I think at least a person like me has the most to contribute to saving the species from going down the tubes. Promote model-based reasoning, promote critical thinking, promote ethical reasoning, which is really hard. In my experience, the calculus of Newton is a whole lot easier than the calculus of ethics. And I practice doing both, and I can tell you which one. Differential equations is much easier than the calculus of ethics when humans are in the loop.
Barry,
Always are.
if you go on my YouTube and you do lessons in critical thinking, you'll see that I have, I think, over 60. You can start with 1, 2, and you see that I'm not giving lectures on critical thinking, but I'm role modeling certain subjects and how to apply critical thinking. Check that out and give me feedback about that.
Yeah. I don't know if you know who Nora Bateson is. She's the daughter of Gregory Bateson. Gregory Bateson is one of the famous pioneers of cybernetics, you know, back 70 years ago or so. And his youngest daughter, Nora, is promoting the International Bateson Institute, which is trying to take her father's introduction to systems thinking out to a broader audience. And she's not expecting people to learn it to, you know, be able to think like her father, but to appreciate the value of having more people who are able to do critical thinking, model-based reasoning. And cybernetics is, I mean, look at, here we are on Zoom. This is all cybernetics. We're in cyberspace, for God's sake. So it works. You know, you're what, I think you said you're in Nevada. Can't remember.
Me?
Yeah, where are you?
I'm near Ottawa right now, but I'm
Okay,
going
that's
back
right,
to
you're
the
in
west
Canada.
coast of
So-
Canada soon.
So here we are, you know, on multiple continents, talking in real time, and that's all because of the communications technology and cybernetics.
We
And
have to
AR.
define cybernetics because I understand it differently. And I understand that cybernetics is a concept that we must explain well before we become systems thinkers. So maybe next week, we could talk more about that because I want to see how other people define it. And we have to suddenly realize that many people define it in different ways. And we have to decide on one definition if we're going to, for example, talk about systems thinking as our species,
Yeah.
for example.
Feedback control theory is a big component of cybernetics. Big component.
And I
that's
want
a-
to know if there's more, because that's the one I'm more aware of that I provide more examples about, but I want to learn more. And that's one way I'd love to hear you define or teach about systems thinking.
It helps to appreciate the etymology because the helm of a ship, the Greek word is kyber. The oarsman, the steering of a ship. The word cyber comes from kyber. So it's how to steer a system so that it doesn't veer off course, it doesn't wander and oscillate, but maintains a steady, well-regulated course towards
Self-correction, yeah.
Yeah, maintains a well-corrected course towards a specific goal or destination. So you define the goal, and then if you have the right model, how the dynamics of the system operates, then you can compute the optimal steering mechanism. And that cybernetics is basically steering yourself to a selected goal state.
And if our systems thinking is about, you know, having money saved up for retirement, let's say that's the ideal goal of our cybernetics here, then did we ever become Homo sapiens? I would say no.
Can I butt in?
Yeah, please.
The economics of what's happening over the next couple of decades is interesting, with the money spent on hemp farming, $360 billion by 2030. That's an incredible amount of growth. And it's producing a plant that takes CO2 out of the air. So that's a good news one. But the other thing about cyberspace, where we come together and are able to communicate openly and privately. We have this cybernetics and cryptographic communications protocols. So a lot of it's to do with technologically appropriate protocols. We develop these things as we go. The internet's evolving into I won't mention anything specifically, but it's evolving, and we've seen that change, enormous change over the last few decades.
Yes.
With groups, especially big, powerful platforms like Facebook and Amazon and Google, AI, the Alphabet. It's a huge, enormous, powerful company now, bigger than some of these giant corporations, Microsoft, Apple. Now, if they want to contribute to the solution, these executives with the deep pockets, multi-millionaires, we can get together an offer for them to help them facilitate that funding and help them.
That's right, Alex. We kind
see
of
the-
think they're going to automatically do it, right? And they might only when they think it's too late. We now have to put our resources to save the planet because we put it in the hands of the UN or politicians or whatever. And by the time they do get there, if that's what they would unconsciously do, is it's probably going to be too late because they don't have the big picture of everything.
Right.
They are doing it. They're not. None of it's coming our way.
Wait, yeah, but it doesn't have the big picture of everything.
And it's slow. It's a snail's pace. And if they don't do it in time, we hit that so-called tipping point where we can't recover. If you veer off course too far, you're in the shoals.
And
You're-
then there's the fact that when we admit that we have past tipping points, because we have with pretty much everything we have ecologically and our own species,
And on our governance.
then we've got the existentialism, let's say, to say, why would we bother now? Let's just party till the end of the world. And that's a different debate to have. And
Mhm.
that's where you can tell who you would want as leaders or not, right? Who is
We're not
capable
gonna-
of real human altruism.
We're not going to extinguish our species because the scientists have already got these proteins copied and mapped out for the next generation to, if we do eventually wipe ourselves out, those plans will be there for the next intelligent life to discover and recreate the human species.
As if we were worthy of that, right? But that's a lot of human chauvinism to believe we are, when the fact is we are not, right? We are not God's gift to this planet.
Well,
There
that's
are
the-
indigenous tribes, in New Guinea and in the Amazon that will probably survive even if Western civilization blows itself up with A-bombs or whatever. There are these indigenous tribes who literally live without technology. They'll be able to survive, but they'll be a tiny, tiny population.
I want to say that I'm going to go in about 3-4 minutes. And
That's fine,
And one last thing I want to say is cybernetics, they will develop naturally as various systems form, or we can also, together with it or separately, create our own. So that brings me to the biggest piece of wisdom I ever read was in a Fantastic Four superhero comic book, where it was one sentence: evolution is key. When a species develops the right kind of intelligence and the right purpose to evolve its own intelligence to benefit a system, like a biosphere, then godlike entities, that can travel to other places, a species that would be interpreted as a godlike entity, can exist. So evolution is key. So that means that's what we need to be able to work on. But we are so far from seeing ourselves as a species objectively, so far from it that it is irreversible. And that's one of the tipping points that tells me that we have failed as a species. And I'm from this species and I want to root for this species. But unfortunately, the evidence is that it's too late. We are not ever going to be writing the history that we were God's gift to this planet. It's too late. We can't reverse that.
The deity of the Old Testament has a name which translates into modern English as the word becoming. That is evolving in a positive direction, so we're becoming more sustainable, more functional, more, more able to thrive and, and prosper. And the deity of the New Testament is salvation, which is if you go off the track of from becoming to unbecoming, how to recover and get back to the becomings. So you have both becoming as the primary goal and salvation for recovering from an episode of unbecoming.
So is Christianity, that Jesus was saving us and died for our sins, one way to try to set us back on course, because unconsciously, the unconscious collective of our species knew we were on the wrong path, and yet his mission seems to have failed if he existed in this way.
Jesus was a premier systems thinker. Now, we don't tend to think of theologians as systems thinkers, but in fact, if you look in the Ninth Intelligence, it's a big umbrella that includes the big picture, the sky god picture. And so Jesus was one of the early pioneers of very advanced systems thinking. And if you have the vocabulary of systems thinking, you can take the teachings of Jesus, just as you can take the teachings of Archimedes or the teachings of Newton or the teachings of Feynman, and you can put them into mathematical models. This is called analytic theology. And then it's not a matter of faith any more than the Pythagorean theorem is a matter of faith. You can memorize Pythagorean theorem and take it as handed down, on high and believe it, but you're much better off understanding why it is a discoverable, provable truth. The same is true of model-based reasoning that emerges out of theological sources. You can frame them in a secular analytical sense, including the teachings of Moses, Buddha, Jesus, Lao Tzu, Confucius.
That even explains the psychology of being spiritual.
Yes.
Barry, you were so excited in talking about this, and I had a resonating excitement about listening to it that I think Jesus ended the hail going so we could hear you better. And please invite Jesus next week to give us some teachings about cybernetics. But I have to go now because I have to go to the bathroom again. And
all right.
But religion is not a topic we should shy away from because it's part of the greater philosophical concepts that we need to discuss. But thank you, Barry.
Yeah,
thank you for admitting you don't talk so much usually when it's a bigger group, but you do when it's a smaller group. I want to hear you talk more, but right now I'm not taking you to the bathroom with me. I'll see you guys next week. I'm not preparing anything for next week. I'll just see what you guys say or respond or ask, or I'll just show up, whatever. I'm not doing anything next week, but I'm joining again next week. All right?
Yep.
Okay, I'm ending my recording and I'm going to post it. And Barry, do I have permission to post the compliment you gave me if you remember what it is?
Anything, everything that I say is public.
Okay, yeah, me too.
Even if it's
And if it isn't, it's because I learned to say, hey, this is between you and me. If I say this, then yes, it means that it's not public.
Don't tell me any secrets, because I'm not good at remembering that I learned something in confidence.
Well, I'll tell you a secret. I'm going to sit on the toilet a long time. It might not just be a pee, and I might read some more comic books for some great wisdom. All right?
Enjoy.
Okay, have a good one.